Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Madagascar. Madagascar, officially the Republic of Madagascar, and previously known as the Malagasy Republic, is an island country in the Indian Ocean, off the coast of Southeast Africa. The nation comprises the island of Madagascar, and numerous smaller peripheral islands. Following the prehistoric breakup of the supercontinent Gondwana, Madagascar split from the Indian peninsula around 88 million years ago, allowing native plants and animals to evolve in relative isolation. Consequently, Madagascar is a biodiversity hotspot. Over 90% of its wildlife is found nowhere else on Earth. The island's diverse ecosystems and unique wildlife are threatened by the encroachment of the rapidly growing human population and other environmental threats. The first archaeological evidence for human foraging on Madagascar dates to 2000 BC. Human settlement of Madagascar occurred between 350 BC and AD 550 by Austronesian peoples arriving on outrigger canoes from Borneo. These were joined around AD 1000 by Bantu migrants crossing the Mozambique Channel from East Africa. Other groups continued to settle on Madagascar over time, each one making lasting contributions to Malagasy cultural life. The Malagasy ethnic group is often divided into 18 or more subgroups, of which the largest are the Merina of the Central Highlands. Until the late 18th century, the island of Madagascar was ruled by a fragmented assortment of shifting, socio-political alliances. Beginning in the early 19th century, most of the island was united and ruled as the Kingdom of Madagascar by a series of Merina nobles. The monarchy collapsed in 1897 when the island was absorbed into the French colonial empire, from which the island gained independence in 1960. The autonomous state of Madagascar has since undergone 4 major constitutional periods, termed republics. Since 1992, the nation has officially been governed as a constitutional democracy from its capital at Antananarivo. However, in a popular uprising in 2009, President Marc Ravalomanana was made to resign and presidential power was transferred in March 2009 to Andry Rajoelina. Constitutional governance was restored in January 2014, when Heri Rajanerimamania was named president following a 2013 election deemed fair and transparent by the international community. Madagascar is a member of the United Nations, the Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, and the Southern African Development Community. Madagascar belongs to the group of least developed countries, according to the United Nations. Malagasy and French are both official languages of the state. The majority of the population adheres to traditional beliefs, Christianity, or an amalgamation of both. Ecotourism and agriculture, paired with greater investments in education, health, and private enterprise, are key elements of Madagascar's development strategy. Under Ravalomanana, these investments produced substantial economic growth, but the benefits were not evenly spread throughout the population, producing tensions over the increasing cost of living and declining living standards among the poor and some segments of the middle class. The economy has been weakened by the 2009-2013 political crisis, and quality of life remains low for the majority of the Malagasy population. Etymology. In the Malagasy language, the island of Madagascar is called Madagascara, and its people are referred to as Malagasy. The island's appellation, Madagascar, is not of local origin, but rather was popularized in the Middle Ages by Europeans. The name Madagascar was first recorded in the memoirs of 13th-century Venetian explorer Marco Polo, as a corrupted transliteration of the name Mogadishu, the Somali port, with which Polo had confused the island. On St. Lawrence's Day in 1500, Portuguese explorer Diogo Dias landed on the island and christened it São Lourenço. Polo's name was preferred and popularized on Renaissance maps. No single Malagasy language name predating Madagascar appears to have been used by the local population to refer to the island, although some communities had their own name for part or all of the land they inhabited. Geography. Madagascar is the world's 47th largest country and the 4th largest island. The country lies mostly between latitudes 12 degrees south and 26 degrees south, and longitudes 43 degrees east and 51 degrees east. Neighboring islands include the French territory of Reunion and the country of Mauritius to the east, as well as the state of Comoros and the French territory of Mayotte to the northwest. The nearest mainland state is Mozambique, located to the west. The prehistoric breakup of the supercontinent Gondwana separated the Madagascar-Antarctica India landmass from the Africa-South America landmass around 135 million years ago. Madagascar later split from India about 88 million years ago, allowing plants and animals on the island to evolve in relative isolation. Along the length of the eastern coast runs a narrow and steep escarpment containing much of the island's remaining tropical lowland forest. To the west of this ridge lies a plateau in the center of the island ranging in altitude from above sea level. These central highlands, traditionally the homeland of the Merina people, and the location of their historic capital at Antananarivo, are the most densely populated part of the island and are characterized by terraced, rice-growing valleys lying between grassy hills, and patches of the subhumid forest that formerly covered the highland region. To the west of the highlands, the increasingly arid terrain gradually slopes down to the Mozambique Channel and mangrove swamps along the coast. Madagascar's highest peaks rise from three prominent highland massifs. Maramokotro in the Zaratanana Massif is the island's highest point, followed by Bobi Peak in the Ondrangitra Massif, and Siafahavona in the Ankaratra Massif. To the east, the Canal des Pangalanes is a chain of man-made and natural lakes connected by canals built by the French just inland from the east coast and running parallel to it for some. The western and southern sides, which lie in the rain shadow of the central highlands, are home to dry deciduous forests, spiny forests, and deserts and xeric shrublands. Due to the lower population densities, Madagascar's dry deciduous forests have been better preserved than the eastern rainforests are the original woodlands of the Central Plateau. The western coast features many protected harbors, but silting is a major problem caused by sediment from the high levels of inland erosion carried by rivers crossing the broad western plains. Climate. The combination of southeastern trade winds and northwestern monsoons produces a hot rainy season with frequently destructive cyclones, and a relatively cooler dry season. Rain clouds originating over the Indian Ocean discharge much of their moisture over the island's eastern coast. The heavy precipitation supports the area's rainforest ecosystem. The central highlands are both drier and cooler while the west is drier still, and a semi-arid climate prevails in the southwest and southern interior of the island. Tropical cyclones annually cause damage to infrastructure and local economies as well as loss of life. In 2004, Cyclone Gafilo became the strongest cyclone ever recorded to hit Madagascar. The storm killed 172 people, left 214,260 homeless and caused more than $250 million in damage. Ecology. As a result of the island's long isolation from neighboring continents, Madagascar is home to an abundance of plants and animals found nowhere else on Earth. Approximately 90% of all plant and animal species found in Madagascar are endemic, including the lemurs, the carnivorous fossa, and many birds. This distinctive ecology has led some ecologists to refer to Madagascar as the eighth continent, and the island has been classified by Conservation International as a biodiversity hotspot. More than 80% of Madagascar's 14,883 plant species are found nowhere else in the world, including 5 plant families. The family Didiaceae, composed of 4 genera and 11 species, is limited to the spiny forests of southwestern Madagascar. 4/5 of the world's Pachypodium species are endemic to the island. 3/4 of Madagascar's 860 orchid species are found here alone, as are 6 of the world's 9 baobab species. The island is home to around 170 palm species, 3 times as many as on all of mainland Africa. 165 of them are endemic. Many native plant species are used as herbal remedies for a variety of afflictions. The drugs vinblastine and vincristine are vinca alkaloids, used to treat Hodgkin's disease, leukemia, and other cancers, were derived from the Madagascar periwinkle. The traveler's palm, known locally as Ravinala and endemic to the eastern rainforests, is highly iconic of Madagascar, and is featured in the national emblem as well as the Air Madagascar logo. Like its flora, Madagascar's fauna is diverse and exhibits a high rate of endemism. Lemurs have been characterized as Madagascar's flagship mammal species by Conservation International, in the absence of monkeys and other competitors. These primates have adapted to a wide range of habitats and diversified into numerous species. There were officially 103 species and subspecies of lemur, 39 of which were described by zoologists between 2000 and 2008. They are almost all classified as rare, vulnerable, or endangered. At least 17 species of lemur have become extinct since humans arrived on Madagascar, all of which were larger than the surviving lemur species. A number of other mammals, including the cat-like fossa, are endemic to Madagascar. Over 300 species of birds have been recorded on the island, of which over 60% are endemic. The few families and genera of reptile that have reached Madagascar have diversified into more than 260 species, with over 90% of these being endemic. The island is home to 2/3 of the world's chameleon species, including the smallest known. And researchers have proposed that Madagascar may be the origin of all chameleons. Endemic fish of Madagascar include 2 families, 15 genera and over 100 species, primarily inhabiting the island's freshwater lakes and rivers. Although invertebrates remain poorly studied on Madagascar, researchers have found high rates of endemism among the known species. All 651 species of terrestrial snail are endemic, as are a majority of the island's butterflies, scarab beetles, lacewings, spiders and dragonflies. Environmental issues. Madagascar's varied fauna and flora are endangered by human activity. Since the arrival of humans around 2,350 years ago, Madagascar has lost more than 90% of its original forest. This forest loss is largely fueled by Tavi, a traditional slash-and-burn agricultural practice imported to Madagascar by the earliest settlers. Malagasy farmers embrace and perpetuate the practice not only for its practical benefits as an agricultural technique, but for its cultural associations with prosperity, health and venerated ancestral custom. As human population density rose on the island, deforestation accelerated beginning around 1,400 years ago. By the 16th century, the Central Highlands had been largely cleared of their original forests. More recent contributors to the loss of forest cover include the growth in cattle herd size since their introduction around 1,000 years ago, a continued reliance on charcoal as a fuel for cooking, and the increased prominence of coffee as a cash crop over the past century. According to a conservative estimate, about 40% of the island's original forest cover was lost from the 1950s to 2000, with a thinning of remaining forest areas by 80%. In addition to traditional agricultural practice, wildlife conservation is challenged by the illicit harvesting of protected forests, as well as the state-sanctioned harvesting of precious woods within national parks. Although banned by then-President Marc Ravalomanana from 2000 to 2009, the collection of small quantities of precious timber from national parks was reauthorized in January 2009. And dramatically intensified under the administration of Andry Rajoelina as a key source of state revenues to offset cuts in donor support following Ravalomanana's ousting. It is anticipated that all the island's rainforests, excluding those in protected areas and the steepest eastern mountain slopes, will have been deforested by 2025. Invasive species have likewise been introduced by human populations. Following the 2014 discovery in Madagascar of the Asian common toad, a relative of a toad species that has severely harmed wildlife in Australia since the 1930s, researchers warned the toad could wreak havoc on the country's unique fauna. Habitat destruction and hunting have threatened many of Madagascar's endemic species or driven them to extinction. The island's elephant birds, a family of endemic giant ratites, became extinct in the 17th century or earlier, most probably due to human hunting of adult birds and poaching of the large eggs for food. Numerous giant lemur species vanished with the arrival of human settlers to the island, while others became extinct over the course of the centuries as a growing human population put greater pressures on lemur habitats and, among some populations, increased the rate of lemur hunting for food. A July 2012 assessment found that the exploitation of natural resources since 2009 has had dire consequences for the island's wildlife. 90% of lemur species were found to be threatened with extinction, the highest proportion of any mammalian group. Of these, 23 species were classified as critically endangered. By contrast, a previous study in 2008 had found only 38% of lemur species were at risk of extinction. In 2003, Ravalomanana announced the Durban Vision, an initiative to more than triple the island's protected natural areas to over, or 10% of Madagascar's land surface areas protected by the state included 5 strict nature reserves, 21 wildlife reserves and 21 national parks. In 2007, 6 of the national parks were declared a joint World Heritage Site under the name Rainforests of the Atsinanana. These parks in Marojeji, Masoala, Ranomafana, Zahamina, Andahahela, and Ondrangitra. Local timber merchants are harvesting scarce species of rosewood trees from protected rainforests within Marojeji National Park and exporting the wood to China. for the production of luxury furniture and musical instruments. To raise public awareness of Madagascar's environmental challenges, the Wildlife Conservation Society opened an exhibit entitled Madagascar in June 2008 at the Bronx Zoo in New York. Early period. The settlement of Madagascar is a subject of ongoing research and debate. Archaeological finds such as cut marks on bones found in the northwest and stone tools in the northeast indicate that Madagascar was visited by foragers around 2000 BC. Traditionally, archaeologists have estimated that the earliest settlers arrived in successive waves throughout the period between 350 BC and 550 AD, while others are cautious about dates earlier than 250 AD. In either case, these dates make Madagascar one of the last major land masses on Earth to be settled by humans. Early settlers arrived in outrigger canoes from southern Borneo. Upon arrival, early settlers practiced slash-and-burn agriculture to clear the coastal rainforests for cultivation. The first settlers encountered Madagascar's abundance of megafauna, including giant lemurs, elephant birds, giant fossa and the Malagasy hippopotamus, which have since become extinct due to hunting and habitat destruction. By 600 AD, groups of these early settlers had begun clearing the forests of the Central Highlands. Arab traders first reached the island between the 7th and 9th centuries. A wave of Bantu-speaking migrants from southeastern Africa arrived around 1000 AD. They introduced the zebu, a type of long-horned humped cattle, which they kept in large herds. By 1600, irrigated paddy fields were developed in the Central Highland Betsileo Kingdom and were extended, with terraced paddies throughout the neighboring kingdom of Imerina a century later. The rising intensity of land cultivation and the ever-increasing demand for zebu pasturage had largely transformed the Central Highlands from a forest ecosystem to grassland by the 17th century. The oral histories of the Merina people, who may have arrived in the Central Highlands between 600 and 1000 years ago, describe encountering an established population they called the Vazimbar, probably the descendants of an earlier and less technologically advanced Austronesian settlement wave. The Vazimbar were assimilated or expelled from the highlands by the Merina kings Andrea Mainlo, Ralambo, and Andrian Jaka in the 16th and early 17th centuries. Today, the spirits of the Vazimbar are revered as Tompontani by many traditional Malagasy communities. Arab and European contacts. Madagascar was an important transoceanic trading hub connecting ports of the Indian Ocean in the early centuries following human settlement. The written history of Madagascar began with the Arabs, who established trading posts along the northwest coast by at least the 10th century and introduced Islam, the Arabic script, Arab astrology, and other cultural elements. European contact began in 1500, when the Portuguese sea captain Diogo Dias sighted the island. The French established trading posts along the east coast in the late 17th century. From about 1774 to 1824, Madagascar gained prominence among pirates and European traders, particularly those involved in the transatlantic slave trade. The small island of Nosy Bora off the northeastern coast of Madagascar has been proposed by some historians as the site of the legendary pirate utopia of Libertalia. Many European sailors were shipwrecked on the coasts of the island, among them Robert Drury, whose journal is one of the few written depictions of life in southern Madagascar. During the 18th century, the wealth generated by maritime trade spurred the rise of organized kingdoms on the island, some of which had grown quite powerful by the 17th century. Among these were the Betsimisaraka alliance of the eastern coast, and the Sakalava chiefdoms of Manabe and Boya on the west coast. The Kingdom of Imerina, located in the Central Highlands with its capital at the Royal Palace of Antananarivo, emerged at around the same time under the leadership of King Andrea Mainalo. Kingdom of Madagascar. Upon its emergence in the early 17th century, the Highland Kingdom of Imerina was initially a minor power relative to the larger coastal kingdoms, and grew even weaker in the early 18th century, when King Andrea Masanavalona divided it among his 4 sons. Following almost a century of warring and famine, Imerina was reunited in 1793 by King Andrea Nimpoinimerina, from his initial capital Ambohimanga, and later from the rover of Antananarivo. This Marina king rapidly expanded his rule over neighboring principalities. His ambition to bring the entire island under his control was largely achieved by his son and successor, King Radama I, who was recognized by the British government as King of Madagascar. Radama concluded a treaty in 1817 with the British governor of Mauritius to abolish the lucrative slave trade in return for British military and financial assistance. Artisan missionary envoys from the London Missionary Society began arriving in 1818, and included such key figures as James Cameron, David Jones and David Griffiths, who established schools, transcribed the Malagasy language using the Roman alphabet, translated the Bible, and introduced a variety of new technologies to the island. Radama's successor, Queen Ranivalona I, responded to increasing political and cultural encroachment on the part of Britain and France by issuing a royal edict prohibiting the practice of Christianity in Madagascar, and pressuring most foreigners to leave the territory. Residents of Madagascar could accuse one another of various crimes, including theft, Christianity, and especially witchcraft, for which the ordeal of Tangina was routinely obligatory. Between 1828 and 1861, the Tangina ordeal caused about 3,000 deaths annually. Among those who continued to reside in Imerina were Jean Laborde, an entrepreneur who developed munitions and other industries on behalf of the monarchy, and Joseph-François Lambert, a French adventurer and slave trader, with whom then Prince Radama II signed a controversial trade agreement termed the Lambert Charter. Succeeding his mother, Radama II attempted to relax the Queen's stringent policies, but was overthrown 2 years later by Prime Minister Rainivoni Nahi-Triniani, and an alliance of Andriana and Hova courtiers, who sought to end the absolute power of the monarch. Following the coup, the courtiers offered Radama's Queen Rasoherina the opportunity to rule, if she would accept a power-sharing arrangement with the Prime Minister, a new social contract that would be sealed by a political marriage between them. Queen Rasoherina accepted, first wedding Rainivoni Nahi-Triniani, then later deposing him and wedding his brother, Prime Minister Rainalirivoni, who would go on to marry Queen Ranivalona II and Queen Ranivalona III in succession. Over the course of Rainilirivoni's 31-year tenure as Prime Minister, numerous policies were adopted to modernize and consolidate the power of the central government. Schools were constructed throughout the island and attendance was made mandatory. Army organization was improved, and British consultants were employed to train and professionalize soldiers. Polygamy was outlawed, and Christianity, declared the official religion of the court in 1869, was adopted alongside traditional beliefs among a growing portion of the populace. Legal codes were reformed on the basis of British common law, and 3 European-style courts were established in the capital city. in his joint role as commander-in-chief. Ranieri also successfully ensured the defense of Madagascar against several French colonial incursions. French colonization. Primarily on the basis that the Lambert Charter had not been respected, France invaded Madagascar in 1883 in what became known as the First Franco-Hovar War. At the end of the war, Madagascar ceded the northern port town of Antsiranana to France, and paid 560,000 francs to Lambertses. In 1890, the British accepted the full formal imposition of a French protectorate on the island, but French authority was not acknowledged by the government of Madagascar. To force capitulation, the French bombarded and occupied the harbour of Thomasina on the east coast, and Mahajanga on the west coast, in December 1894 and January 1895 respectively. A French military flying column then marched toward Antananarivo, losing many men to malaria and other diseases. Reinforcements came from Algeria and sub-Saharan Africa. Upon reaching the city in September 1895, the column bombarded the royal palace with heavy artillery, causing heavy casualties and leading Queen Ranivalona III to surrender. France annexed Madagascar in 1896 and declared the island a colony the following year, dissolving the Marina monarchy and sending the royal family into exile on Acutunian Island and to Algeria. A two-year resistance movement organized in response to the French capture of the royal palace was effectively put down at the end of 1897. Under colonial rule, plantations were established for the production of a variety of export crops. Slavery was abolished in 1896, and approximately 500,000 slaves were freed. Many remained in their former masters' homes as servants or as sharecroppers. In many parts of the island, strong discriminatory views against slave descendants are still held. Today, wide paved boulevards and gathering places were constructed in the capital city of Antananarivo, and the Rover Palace compound was turned into a museum. Additional schools were built, particularly in rural and coastal areas where the schools of the marina had not reached. Education became mandatory between the ages of 6 to 13 and focused primarily on French language and practical skills. The marina royal tradition of taxes paid in the form of labor was continued under the French, and used to construct a railway and roads linking key coastal cities to Antananarivo. Malagasy troops fought for France in World War I in the 1930s. Nazi political thinkers developed the Madagascar Plan that had identified the island as a potential site for the deportation of Europe's Jews. During the Second World War, the island was the site of the Battle of Madagascar between the Vichy government and the British. The occupation of France during the Second World War tarnished the prestige of the colonial administration in Madagascar, and galvanized the growing independence movement, leading to the Malagasy Uprising of 1947. This movement led the French to establish reformed institutions in 1956 under the Loi Cadre, and Madagascar moved peacefully towards independence. The Malagasy Republic was proclaimed on 14 October 1958 as an autonomous state within the French community. A period of provisional government ended with the adoption of a constitution in 1959 and full independence on 26 June 1960. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.